I was 30 when I decided to quit. And with that, the secret crush no one knew about came to an end. It took me 5 years to rise from assistant to Jason Smith's chief secretary, and another 3 to make myself indispensable to him. In the end, it took 5 minutes to write my resignation, and 1 second to hit send. When I handed it in, Jason's brows drew together, and he looked up at me, steady and unhurried. "Give me a reason." I lowered my eyes, tugged a smile into place, and made it sound as sincere as I could. "Mr. Smith, I'm 30. It's time I got married." I thought for a moment and added, "My boyfriend proposed not long ago." To make the resignation go smoothly, I told a harmless lie. Jason's fingers tapped the desktop, beat by beat that meant he was highly irritated. Maybe I should have been grateful. At least my leaving didn't leave him entirely unmoved. After a long pause, Jason handed the letter back. "I can approve time off for your wedding. I hope you'll think carefully about resigning." For a second I wavered. A coaxing voice in my head kept whispering, "Say yes. Say yes, at least you'll still get to see him." Another voice warned me, "Isabel, he's getting engaged. Carrying a torch for a taken man isn't right." My hands hovered in midair for a long time, and in the end, I didn't take it. This job is too demanding. After I'm married, I want to spend more time on family. I'll hand off everything on my plate. "I'm sorry, Mr. Smith." At that point, Jason said no more. "Got it. Congratulations," he replied coolly. By the time I left, he was already buried in work again. To him, I was just a subordinate at best, the most useful one. That day, I sat at my desk, stared at the little potted plant, and zoned out for once. It rarely happened. My days were packed, coordinating the office while doubling as Jason's personal assistant. My phone stayed on 24/7. Whenever Jason needed me, I had to show up one person doing the work of several. He did pay me generously, and within a few years I'd reached financial freedom. Anna called my name several times before I snapped out of it. "Isabel, Mr. Smith asked me to tell you to head over and set up tonight's party." The party was to welcome Larry back from studying abroad, and the attendees were the same few from Jason's tight circle. Young heirs of old, families rich, privileged, their standards sky high. Strictly speaking, that circle didn't welcome outsiders. But I was too useful. People who could balance everyone's moods and preferences and run an event without a single misstep were rare. I reached the venue and got to work at once. From the menu to the drinks to the desserts, I went down each heir's allergies and likes. Remove all lilies, Juan's allergic. Dim the lights, Kyle just had eye surgery. Have some Taiping Hukui tea ready, that's Larry's favorite. As the sun set and the sky went dark, guests trickled in. Kyle arrived first and called out, "When's Jason getting here?" I checked my watch and answered carefully. "He has another meeting tonight, about an hour." He slumped onto the sofa, listless, bluish shadows under his eyes, bone-tired. I told someone to turn the music down and handed him a blanket. "It's chilly tonight. There'll be a while, get some rest." He took it with a grin and teased, "Seriously, won't you ditch Jason and jump ship to me? I'll pay you double." People like them had flatterers lining up, which made me stand out. I wanted nothing from them, so I could be straightforward, and that won me a bit of respect. Playing along, I smiled back. "I'll hold you to it. If I ever have nowhere to go, take me in, Kyle." As night deepened and the streetlights came on, the room filled up. Jason arrived in a black overcoat, bringing in a trace of autumn chill. I took his coat, thinking it might be the last time. When the drinks were flowing and spirits were high, I found a moment to say I was leaving. I stood and toasted the table. "I'm resigning. I knew nothing when I started and made plenty of messes. Thank you for your patience all these years. The road ahead is long. I hope we'll meet again." Maybe it was the bleakness of fall, but the table fell quiet. Kyle lifted his glass to me across the room and broke the lull. "At first, I figured you had an angle with Jason. Only now do I truly believe you didn't." Everyone knew what he meant. Jason's previous secretaries had been fired for confessing to him. He'd switched to hiring only men and still got confessed to, earning him the heartthrob label. Someone patted Jason's shoulder and ribbed him. Didn't expect that. Huh. Someone actually immune to your charm. Jason lit a cigar, all nonchalance, and laughed. Get lost. After dinner, a few of them put together a card game to kill time. Midway through, Kyle asked casually, Jason, that girl your grandma picked for you, have you met her yet? My heart skipped. The hand pouring water froze midair. After a moment, Jason answered offhandedly, No, as long as grandma's happy. A wife is a wife. In their world, marriage was always a calculation, the sum of interests and considerations. In a way, it was fair. They enjoyed resources most people couldn't imagine, and paying a price came with the territory. Jason seemed to have accepted that. I'd met Kristen Cindy once, gentle and lovely, a good girl. If I could, I'd wish Jason a different ending from the usual. The dinner ran late. Drivers waited outside and whisked people away as soon as we broke up. Only Jason's driver had a minor accident on the way and arrived late. So the scene I dreaded most appeared. The two of us standing side by side beneath a street lamp, the light stretching our shadows long. Times like that always stirred up the bitterness and dark thoughts. Jason knew nothing about any of it. He just stood there quietly, the edge taken off by the alcohol. Before long, his driver finally arrived. Jason glanced at me with gentlemanly courtesy. Want a ride? I shook my head and offered a grateful yet distant smile. Thank you, Mr. Smith, but my fiancé is already on his way. Jason said nothing more, just gave a small nod and ducked into the car. At last, the world was quiet again, just me alone. All the masks I'd worn through the day finally slipped off. I kicked off my heels and sat down on the flower bed edge, uncharacteristically adrift. For a moment, I had no idea where to go. Soon the sky began to drizzle, the first autumn rain after the start of fall, damp and cold against my skin. Barefoot, I walked down the road. This was a wealthy neighborhood, and it took a long while before I found a taxi stand. The road I usually took was under repair, and the driver didn't know, so we had to circle back. Jason never expected to see Isabel again, waiting in the rain by the curb, holding a shoe by its strap, swinging it idly. He was a little surprised. He hadn't thought the ever-composed Isabel could look so careless. In the office, she was always in sharp suits, every button fastened to the top. He'd seen plenty of women loosen their buttons and lean over his desk by accident, but Isabel was different. That was one reason he relied on her, her professionalism, and her sense of boundaries. As they were about to pass her, the driver asked, "Should we give Secretary Isabel a lift?" Jason's gaze stayed calm. No need. He'd already formed a poor opinion of her fiancé. Isabel was smart, but her choice of men seemed questionable. Then again, feelings were like drinking water, only the one drinking knew if it was warm or cold. He couldn't interfere too much. I wasn't sure if it was Jason's car I saw flashing by. Maybe I imagined it. People in rich neighborhoods rarely hailed cabs like I did. The driver had come from far away, and by the time I finally got in, my legs were numb from standing. It was already 2 or 3 in the morning when I got home. The house was silent. Outwardly, I told everyone I had a happy family, a loving fiancé, plenty of friends. People often looked at me with envy and said, "That's a perfect life." But in truth, I had nothing. No family, no lover, no friends. When I was in middle school, my mum was diagnosed with breast cancer, already advanced. They removed a breast, but within 6 months it came back. One ordinary morning, my dad left for work and never came back. He took all our money and abandoned my sick mother and me, still underage. When she heard, my mum was strangely calm. She endured chemo, hospital stays, and, on her good days, even cooked for me. One evening after school, I came home to a table full of dishes. She sat across from me, smiling. For some reason, dread washed over me. The food smelled odd when I leaned closer. I thought of the bottle of rat poison in the bathroom. That night, I learned how strong my mother's grip could be. I couldn't break free. My survival instinct kicked in, and when she loosened for a second, I bolted, somehow stumbling all the way to the rooftop. My mum cried and opened her arms, babbling, "Sweetheart, the world is so cruel. I can't leave you here alone. Come with me. In the next life, we'll still be mother and daughter." I cried too. I was so tired. I missed the scent of laundry soap on her embrace. Maybe this was better, I thought. Life wasn't much to cling to. The wind on the rooftop was fierce, her arms so warm. Hand in hand, we stepped closer to the edge. Just as we were about to fall, a pair of lean, powerful hands grabbed me. He held on no matter how I thrashed. In the whipping wind, I saw only a pair of eyes, bright and startling. I survived that night, but my mum didn't. That man was Jason. He not only saved me, but gave me a reason to live repayment. I felt like I'd betrayed my mom. I was a drowning girl, clutching driftwood. Jason was that driftwood. Fire trucks, police, ambulances arrived, people everywhere, and I held his hand tightly, looked up at him. "How can I ever repay you?" I still remember 16-year-old Jason looking down at me. Serious as he said, "Then remember to find me." My life froze on the night my mum died, and Jason became my only hope. That night I dreamed the same dream as always. Swallowed by the past, my mum asked me why I hadn't gone with her. I saw my dad's silent eyes before he left us too. I woke drenched in sweat, my throat so raw no sound came out. The thermometer read 101.8 degrees Fahrenheit. Normally I'd pop a pill, shake it off, and head to work. This time I took a rare sick day. I needed to think about my future. When Jason got to the office and found Isabel absent, he asked and learned she was out sick. He frowned, and his impression of her so-called fiancé sank even lower. Assistant Anna was covering. She brought in coffee. Jason sipped, his face unchanged. One sugar too many, but he said nothing. Just set it aside after a sip. Then the prep for the morning meeting went wrong. Luckily, he already knew the key points, so it wasn't a disaster. Still, the office felt off the air, a little too dry, his throat scratchy, the thermostat low. Nothing major, just constant small irritations. For the first time, Jason thought of Isabel. He rarely did, because she never called attention to herself. Her steadiness was like gentle spring rain, subtle, unseen, yet everything was in order. He frowned again, for the second time that day. All because Isabel's useless fiancé had stolen away his chief secretary. I lay in bed all day, thinking, and still had no answer about my path. Like a boat lost in open sea. No sense of direction. The next morning, I just went back to work. When I walked into the office, Anna glanced at me nervously and whispered, "Mr. Smith seemed in a bad mood yesterday." He barely touched his morning coffee. Last night's cup still sat on his desk. I dipped a finger and tasted it. Too much sugar. 3 cubes exactly. No more, no less. I demonstrated how to make it properly again, and Anna watched closely. By the time the coffee was ready, Jason had arrived. Maybe it was my imagination, but the corners of his lips curved a little higher than usual, and in his eyes lingered something like reproach. Handing off my work turned out harder than I thought. I carried too much. It wasn't easy to pass it on at once, and Jason was never easy. To serve, every detail of his life needed careful tending. So I grabbed a notebook and started jotting down everything, from the smallest detail to the biggest task. With that delay, what was supposed to be wrapped up in a month had to be postponed. Which led to the one thing I most wanted to avoid, picking up Kristen at the airport and taking her to the old estate. I had feelings I shouldn't for Jason. I'd never acted on them, but facing the fiancée herself still left me guilty. Kristen wore a pale blue cheongsam, a vivid green jade pendant at her throat worth a fortune. Her hair was pinned up with a single hairpin, radiating a nobility that stood out anywhere. I forced a smile and stepped forward. "Miss Kristen, Mr. Smith asked me to pick you up." On the way, Kristen asked me a few things about Jason. About to marry someone she'd only met a handful of times. Of course she was uneasy. I caught her worry and answered gently. Mr. Smith is a good man. You don't need to worry. If anything ever comes up, you can always come to me." She lifted her eyes with gratitude at my words. We chatted all the way until we reached the old estate. I meant to leave once I dropped her off, but Mr. Smith stopped me. In his day, he was known in the business world for his iron hand. Now, in his 70s, he was still vigorous, especially those piercing eyes. "Secretary Isabel, where's Jason?" Jason hadn't come? I kept my face steady and answered carefully. "There's a lot going on at the company today. Mr. Smith may be a little late." The old man snorted coldly and granted me the mercy of fetching Jason back. I had once seen him discipline Jason with 6 lashes of a whip, leaving bloody marks. The scars still lined Jason's back. Once outside, I hurried to call Jason. Thank God on the 3rd try he picked up. I blurted out asking where he was. He didn't answer. After a while, he just said my name, Isabel. His voice was blurred, like he'd been drinking, with the roar of the sea in the background. I thought I knew where he was. When I rushed over, I found Jason leaning against the rocks by the shore, a few cheap bottles of Beiju beside him, his hair whipped by the night wind. He lifted his eyes at the sound. They were hazy, yet still sharp, as if drunk, yet not. "You're here? Give me a sec." He patted the spot beside him, inviting me over. "Let's talk." The Smith family estate wasn't far from the cliffs. At night, the lights blazed, but its pavilions and towers kept an air of old-world elegance. Jason suddenly asked, "Beautiful, isn't it?" My eyes were still caught on his jawline, and I answered without thinking, "Beautiful." My face flamed red. Luckily, he didn't notice, only continued. "But inside it's just a tomb. White jade halls and golden horses mean nothing. What lies inside are only countless bones." He said it with a smile, but every word was serious. Rumor had it, the Smith fortune wasn't clean, built on grey dealings. In recent years, they were shifting into legitimacy. I'd spent 7 years by his side, watching him claw his way into power. How much blood and betrayal, open and hidden, no outsider could ever know. "So did he get tired too?" I asked. "Are you happy?" The word lingered on his tongue. He laughed suddenly, but didn't answer. Instead, he looked at me and said, "Your fiancé's no good." I froze. He didn't explain, only gave a nod of apology. "Sorry, out of line." Jason downed the last of his drink and stood. In an instant, he was once again the untouchable Mr. Smith. On the way home, his words kept circling in my head. What did Jason mean by that? I couldn't figure it out, just as I never understood why. All those years ago, he'd shown up alone on that rooftop, but none of it mattered anymore. I was leaving. From here on, the mountains and rivers would keep us apart, and I might never see him again. The day I resigned, it rained. Southern rain, fine, dense, endless. I sat at my desk in silence, packing my things. I'd been in that seat nearly 10 years, from a clueless 20-something to someone who could hold her own. I knew that every morning at 9, the sunlight would slant across the cactus I kept. I knew that if I stood on tiptoe, I could glimpse Jason's outline through a crack. I had staggered through life on these little things, but now I was leaving. I'd repaid the debt of my life with 8 years. From here, Kristen would walk the rest of the road with him. Anna's eyes brimmed as she looked at me. I wiped her tears and smiled. Silly girl. It's not like we'll never see each other again. But in my heart, I knew we wouldn't. This city held too much pain for me. I had to go. Turning away, regret tugged at me not seeing Jason one last time, despite all the delays I'd contrived. After quitting, I slept for days, like making up for all the rest I'd lost over the years. I bought some liquor, cranked the TV volume to max. A comedy was playing. I laughed and laughed like a fool. When the laughter died, I just sat there on the floor, staring into the dark. As a child, my biggest wish was to study hard if I got good grades. Maybe my parents wouldn't fight. Later, when Dad left, my wish was to earn enough money to keep Mom alive. After she died, my wish became to be Jason's most capable aide. If he was happy, so was I. But now, I didn't know where to go. As I sat dazed, the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Jason. I scrambled to open the door, then realized I was still in my pink bunny pajamas. Too late to shut it again. I had no choice but to let him in. I forced a professional smile. Jason, calmer than me, explained. I called. Today's document is urgent, and I couldn't find the draft. I happened to be driving nearby. The flush on my face passed quickly as I replaced it with a smile. Of course, Mr. Smith. Please sit. I'll go find it. While I searched, Jason sat politely on the sofa, not looking around, just watching me. It made me squirm. The more flustered I got, the harder it was to find anything. Jason chuckled. Take your time. Then he asked, Doesn't your fiancé live here? I lied without thinking. He'll be back later tonight. It took me half an hour to gather the right files and print them out for Jason. Jason took them, then for some reason stared at me, making my skin crawl. I was about to speak when he suddenly smiled, that same warm yet distant smile. I'm about to get married. I can't find the right person for the job. Isabel, could you do me a favor? I'll pay you the same salary. I'd never been good at refusing Jason, my body agreed before my mind did. I nodded without knowing why, then gave him a faint smile. The words on my lips slipped back down my throat. From that day on, I returned to Jason's side, in charge of his engagement ceremony. Maybe that was best. Watching him marry with my own eyes would finally let me give up. Out of guilt toward Kristen, I handled everything personally, wanting her to have a flawless engagement. But Jason seemed busy with other things, rarely showing up. And whenever something came up, he contacted only me. It felt less like his engagement than someone else's. Kristen grew more dispirited by the day. While trying on dresses one afternoon, she looked at me almost pleadingly. Secretary Isabel, can you ask him if he's coming today? So I called. The line connected. Jason's voice came through. Hello? The background was loud, his voice roughened by drink. He was at a banquet. I meant to hang up, but remembering Kristen's sad face, I forced myself to ask carefully, The dress arrived today. Will you be coming to the estate? Silence stretched. Just as I was about to apologize for overstepping, Jason spoke. Sure. Come pick me up. I didn't know why he wanted me to fetch him, but I did as told. By the time I rushed over, the banquet had ended. Leaving Jason alone, drunk and dazed, he lay on the sofa. I crouched down and patted him lightly. Mr. Smith! Mr. Smith! He suddenly lifted his head and fixed me with eyes sharp as blades. I froze, but a moment later, his gaze clouded again. Maybe I'd imagined it. Supporting him, I stumbled with him into the car. He fell asleep as soon as we got in. In the rearview mirror, I could see his face. Rarely did I get to look at him so openly, and I couldn't resist stealing a few glances. Guilt toward Kristen pricked deeper, so I forced myself to look away. I whispered calming prayers over and over. Yet unease crept in. My instincts were sharp, and now alarm bells rang. Something was wrong. A black SUV had been trailing us for half an hour. Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith. I tried to wake him, but he didn't stir. Left with no choice, I sped up. The SUV sped up too. On the coastal highway, the chase grew intense. The other car was clearly modified. No matter how I pushed, it shadowed us with ease. At last, it rammed us and sped off. The car rolled with a violent crash. At the last second, I jerked the wheel, stopping us from plunging into the sea. Blood blurred my vision. My head spun. I crawled out through the crushed frame. Jason was pinned in the back seat, eyes open now, struggling but trapped under the wreckage. From the trunk, I grabbed a crowbar and tried to pry open the door. It didn't budge. Gasoline leaked from the tank, spreading across the ground. Smoke curled from the back seat. The more urgent the situation, the clearer my mind became. Fear, panic, useless emotions all gone. Only one thought remained. Get Jason out. Flames crept closer, the car moments from exploding. Jason looked up at me. "The salary I pay you isn't worth your life. Isabel, leave me. The car's about to blow." His muttering only grated on me more. I snapped. "Shut up!" Jason suddenly laughed. For reasons I couldn't fathom. I had no time to care. Fire licked closer. My hand had been cut, blood dripping steadily. But with the last of my strength, I wrenched Jason free. Propping him up, I staggered, step by step, away from the wreck. Moments later, the car exploded. Fire, painting the night red. I was glad I'd never bought into the fragile, waifish ideal of beauty. My strength and endurance had saved both our lives. Sirens wailed in the distance. Exhaustion hit like a wave, and darkness swallowed me. Jason woke before I did. He remembered how, at the last moment, Isabel had turned the wheel toward her own side. Sitting by her now, he seemed to truly see her for the first time. He'd been abandoned by many. As a child, once kidnapped with his father, only one could board the boat. He was the one thrown aside. No matter how he cried or screamed, he could only watch as the boat drifted away. His mother had once promised never to leave him, yet she'd ended her own life with a single rope. Again and again, people had walked into his life, only to cast him off without hesitation. He was always the one left behind. But this woman, she had every reason to abandon him. And she hadn't. He'd always prided himself on reading people. But this time, he couldn't see what she wanted. What did she want? It felt like waking from a strange dream. Jason looked at me thoughtfully. My heart sank. Had he seen through me my forbidden feelings for him? He studied me quietly, our eyes locked, sweat slicking my palms, as though awaiting judgment. "Why did you save me?" My mind raced. Then I smiled and answered, "Mr. Smith, I'm a gambler. A life debt from the head of Smith Group. Who wouldn't bet on that?" Jason frowned, his gaze heavy, as though weighing the truth. "What do you want?" In his world, those who claimed to want nothing were the ones who wanted the most. But exchanges of benefit were the only thing that brought trust. I thought carefully about what demand would justify risking my life, something that would put him at ease. 1% of Smith Group's shares, enough to keep me fed for life. Jason's brow eased. I knew I'd played it right. He gave a small smile. "Shares are unreliable. How about a storefront in the heart of the city instead? What do you think, Isabel?" I smiled too. "A shop worth tens of millions, thank you, Mr. Smith." Each of us got what we wanted, freeing Jason of guilt. He rose and said coolly, "Rest well, Isabel. Don't worry about the engagement anymore." I spent a week in the hospital. The day I was discharged was also Jason's grand engagement day. My phone was flooded with news of the alliance. The scene like a dream. It was good. From now on, our roads were separate. I'd repaid my debt and taken my reward. So why did it still hurt? Aimlessly, I wandered the streets, and by chance ended up at a bar. Over the years, I'd always been the one to clean up after others, so I rarely drank. I never liked drinking. They say one drunk night can wash away 1,000 sorrows, but the liquor was so bitter it made me cry. The tears fell into the glass, turning it into something bitter and salty. Just before I lost consciousness, I ordered a delivery service, telling the runner to get me home safely. At the engagement party, Jason picked up a call, not one of the staged ones he'd arranged, but from Secretary Isabel. It didn't matter. He only needed an excuse to leave anyway. Driving to the bar, he was met by a young man in a blue vest who rushed forward. She asked me to take her home, but she never told me where she lives. I had no choice but to call the number she pinned at the top. He gave Jason a nervous look. "You're not her boss, are you? She won't give me a bad rating tomorrow, will she?" Jason took Isabel from his arms and reassured him. "Don't worry. She won't. Leave the rest to me." Supporting Isabel, he started walking out. The woman in his arms was restless, poking his face one moment, tugging his hair the next. She was truly drunk. They say drunken words are sober thoughts. Jason decided to test her. Why did you come to me? She frowned as if thinking hard, then giggled foolishly. To repay a debt. Jason frowned again. What debt? The debt of saving my life. Jason pressed on. And how are you planning to repay it? By giving him everything good in this world. Why give him everything good in this world? Because I love him. In college, Jason had taken a course on interrogation. The key was to follow the other's logic, leading them step by step into your own questions. He thought he might learn something. He hadn't expected this answer. She loved him. Secretary Isabel loved him. Jason looked at Isabel again and again. She smiled like a fool, drunk beyond pretense. Many had told him they loved him. He had seen love in every form. Fiery, gentle, and everything in between. But this was the first time he had seen love like this, buried in silence for years, unseen by anyone. Some things suddenly made sense why Isabel's home showed no trace of a man. Could he believe her? Was it truly only because of love that life and death didn't matter? The next day, I woke with my head splitting, dragging myself out of the drunken haze. I vaguely remembered dreaming last night, the only clear thing being Jason's dark, fathomless eyes. Why had I dreamed of him again? Dreaming of another woman's husband was wrong, I thought. For a long time, I forced myself not to follow any news about Smith Group. I roamed from one end of the country to the other, getting off trains at random stops, wandering from city to city. I visited people myself, assessed their situations, and arranged aid in tears. Sometimes I wondered if maybe my mother had wanted to live on. If someone had reached out a hand back then, would it all have been different? There were too many suffering souls in the world. I could only help those I saw before me. The next time I saw Jason's name, it was in headlines about Smith Group's bankruptcy. On the cover, his and Kristen's photos had been split apart. In bold red letters, "Alliance broken. Where does Smith Group go from here?" Panic struck me. I called Kristen. Her voice held a trace of guilt, but in the end she only sighed. "Isabel, you should know. I never married a man. I married a family. I was powerless." After the first wave of panic, my mind calmed, and the more I thought about it, the less it seemed right. I realized maybe this had all been Jason's doing. For years, Smith Group had seemed gilded, spanning countless industries, but it was unwieldy. Beneath the prosperity lay crisis. I had tried to warn Jason, but he brushed me off every time. I thought he had some greater plan. Turns out from the start, he meant for this to happen. I remembered the drunken look in his eyes that night. Smith Group was nothing but a cage to him. Suddenly I felt he needed someone by his side, just like the night my mother pulled me to jump, and Jason had clung to my hand. Whoever it was, as long as they held on, it would be enough. With that thought, I rushed to the company. Once ablaze with light, now most of the building was dark. The last funds had gone to compensating employees. I passed rows of empty desks and pushed open the door. Jason was swallowed by shadow, the capital's wind rattling the blinds. He lifted his eyes to me, gaze dim, thoughts unreadable. I stepped forward and took his hand. I had thought of 1,000 things to say, but in that moment, all slipped away. All I knew was I wanted to hold his hand, the way he had once held mine. His mind drifted to his mother, the poor girl, who had married into wealth, only to become the family's hidden madwoman. They'd tried to mold a wild child into a perfect matriarch. False affection, cold restraint, endless compromise. They'd driven her mad. Later people said she lacked fortune, that she wasn't cut out for the role. But what if the rules were wrong to begin with? Smith Group had always dealt in shadows. His mother saw things she couldn't stomach. She refused to feed on others, and so others fed on her. Jason had planned to face it all alone, to let the filth return to dust with him. But Isabel came. Was it love? He had seen her when she first arrived, walking against the tide while everyone else rushed out, like a knight rushing to protect her princess. Jason smiled faintly at the thought. How could such a fool exist? She said nothing, only reached for his hand. Warmth flowed steadily into his cold fingers. Only then did he realize how chilled he'd been. So he tightened his grip on hers. Wind howled, rain shook, but her warmth was real. I stayed with Jason as he settled Smith Group's final debts. Jason faced the media. Eggs hurled in fury. Smith Group owed too much blood. The people needed an outlet for their rage. It was a debt to be repaid. On the day Smith Group declared bankruptcy, old Mr. Smith was rushed to the hospital. Jason asked me to drink with him. Only when I arrived did I realize it was his home in the city center. I froze in the doorway. This isn't really appropriate, is it? I meant that we weren't the sort who could just drink together. To me, it felt like overstepping. Jason's eyes lowered, a trace of desolation in his voice, as if choked with tears. Was he crying? My heart clenched tight. I took the bottle from him, and his eyes lit up. Forget it. If keeping him company meant risking everything, then so be it. Endurance was always what I did best. I had never seen Jason like this before. Tie and collar undone, his suit wrinkled, looking weary and fragile, as if he might dissolve into the night. He'd always been someone untouchable, a man who appeared only surrounded by others, every move noble and distant. But now he seemed to have fallen from the heavens to the earth. Half drunk, Jason kept calling my name, insisting I answer. His voice was hoarse from the alcohol, striking my eardrums and thudding straight into my chest. Suddenly he leaned close, barely an inch between us. I could see the light catching on his lashes, scattering tiny shadows. Secretary Isabel, will you always be here? I didn't answer. No one could promise to stay forever, least of all me. What right did I have to stay by his side? But he pressed on, as if he wouldn't stop until he had an answer. Finally, I gave in with a helpless smile. Yes, I'll always be here. Satisfied, Jason quieted, frowning at me as though lost in thought. Then suddenly he muttered he was hot, yanking open 2 buttons on his shirt. A faint, dangerous allure in the gesture. I froze, forcing myself to look away. Yet despite saying he was hot, he kept leaning closer to me. My face burned. This winter felt unbearably warm. Summoning the last of my self-control, I pulled away. Jason glanced at me strangely, then went back to drinking. He drank until he collapsed in a stupor. In that final moment before fainting, he looked at me for a long time, something like encouragement flickering in his eyes. Encouragement, why? After settling him in, I went home, puzzled all night over what he meant. The next day, Jason called, thanking me specifically for taking such good care of him. Embarrassed, I smiled. It was nothing, Mr. Smith, just my duty. The line went silent for a moment. Then Jason ground out my name. Isabel, you really... He never finished the sentence. The call ended, leaving me confused. Smith Group was gone. Jason and I had no reason to keep seeing each other. In fact, I hadn't seen him for days until he turned up drunk, knocking at my door. The moment I opened it, he collapsed into my arms. I struggled to get him onto the sofa. As I turned to leave, he pulled me back, and I stumbled into his embrace. So close, his eyes locked on mine, and he whispered softly, Isabel. My name had always felt like an unwanted extra syllable, but on his lips it sounded beautiful. His gaze held only me. My heart thundered uncontrollably, closer, closer still, until finally, everything blurred into chaos. All my so-called restraint went up in ashes. When I woke the next morning, shame drove me to flee. Halfway down the street, I remembered it was my house. I lingered outside until dusk, then slipped the door open carefully. The light snapped on. Jason was still there, looking up at me with a half smile. What? Planning not to take responsibility? I froze, caught between retreat and advance. We need to talk. I had meant to tell him last night. Meant nothing. A drunken mistake. But he stopped me. Weary resignation in his eyes. Nothing good ever comes out of your mouth. So just listen to me first. His expression was so grave, even graver than on the day Smith Group collapsed. My nerves tightened instantly. Isabel, you think too highly of me. I'm nothing special. I've got every ordinary man's flaws: greed, anger, envy. I shook my head to protest, but he kept speaking. I know you're not thinking clearly right now, and it's unfair to make you decide. But if I give you time, once you see what kind of man I really am, you won't like me anymore. Whether your feelings are gratitude, respect, or admiration, you're the one who stirred this up. You don't get to run now. From somewhere, Jason produced a ring, his gaze burning into mine. So, Belle, will you marry me? My mind went blank, and before I knew it, I nodded. He slid the ring onto my finger. Got your ID? I nodded automatically. Jason smiled. Then let's go. Go where? To get our license. We became the last couple registered at the bureau that day. When we stepped out, the sky was aflame with sunset, red clouds painting the heavens. And with that, all my longing and regrets finally settled into dust.